Yeah, that didn't really work for anyone that was watching through any of the live streams. I'm also running a feed out to TikTok right now too. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be looking up that way for now until I find a different place to put that phone. But apparently I forgot to have the sound on, so I apologize. I was watching the Citizen Stringer. They could hear it, but nobody else could hear it. So that's funny. Welcome to a full new episode of F It, I'm Done. You may be curious and saying, Steve, why are you doing a show at 1:24 Eastern time? You normally do this at night. I decided that I'm going to, for one, I'm not really feeling good. I'm not quite sure what it was. But second to that is I'm going to be taking my kids. We got to pick up a coffee table. You know, we just bought the house. So we have to pick up a coffee table. And in addition to that, my son has a martial arts thing tonight. So we're going to go with them and experience that, which should be good. Let me see if this camera, got to drag this shade over here because I feel like I keep turning like this and all this stuff. But anyway, so we'll use this camera. And then we have multiple cameras and I could switch back and forth like, oh, there's the side view. Very nice. Very nice. Anyway, we're going to talk about some stuff today that I think is important, I guess, is the easiest way to say it. Important stuff to talk about. I don't understand the Supreme Court here. These confirmation hearings today. I don't understand it. I don't understand for the past 2 days how. Because here's the way I feel. You know, for anyone that didn't watch those hearings, it's not going to make a lot of sense, right? You know, this Ketanji Brown Jackson seems like a great person, right? She seems nice, highly educated, great. All around just seems like a great person until you look into her track record as a judge on the federal circuit. I think in the year that she was in the federal circuit or whatever, she put out opinions on 130 cases or something. Now, we heard today during the confirmation hearings that some of the Democrat leadership were saying, well, their colleagues from the other side, meaning the Republicans, were only cherry picking a certain amount of cases, 14 of the 100 plus cases that she cited opinions on. But what they did is they cherry picked every case that had to do with the child pornography. I don't understand how someone and I've struggled to try to understand this today. Okay. Not a lot that goes on with this current administration, or frankly, any administration for that matter, makes a whole lot of sense to me. None of it really does, you know, because what's the right word? I don't care that much about politics, or maybe I didn't. So that's the key. I didn't care as much about politics as I do now, which is the frustrating thing, because today we were watching the hearing. Yesterday we watched the hearing. We heard all of these issues with her sentencing guidelines, right? Where the sentencing guidelines imposed by the government said that someone that was caught, you know, with whatever. I'm going to try to be a little mellow because I'm on TikTok today. I want to see what that does. But the sentencing guidelines for someone that is trafficking in pictures, you know, children pictures, that sentencing guideline is a guideline that's issued by the government, right? Now, judges are supposed to follow that guideline. So you sentence based on, so if the guideline says for, you know, this amount, then the person is going to be sentenced to 5 years to 10 years, right? That is the guideline that judge is supposed to follow. Then they also have a prosecution guideline, or a prosecution, what the prosecution is pushing for. So if the prosecution is pushing for, say, 4 years to 8 years, that's another consideration that the judge would take. The third qualifying, and then obviously the judge's opinion. So let's go with the fourth. The fourth deciding factor in how this particular judge got her cases was simply by using the probationary. So basically it's a pretrial, you know, release for, not pretrial document that's issued by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, I believe, or probation document, which gives the sentencing guideline as well. Her argument when she was countered by Republicans I won't even say countered. We could say what some of the Democrats on that Judicial Committee were saying is that she was attacked. Essentially, Senator Cotton basically came up and said, listen, we went through all of your cases. We picked out the ones that have to do with these child pictures. And of those 14 cases, 100% of the time, you sentence people with a way outside of the sentencing guidelines imposed by the state, way outside the sentencing guidelines imposed by the prosecutor, and then this whole thing came out. So, like, for example, one guy was caught with 6,500 photos, an 18-year-old kid, and he was sentenced to 3 months in jail. It doesn't make any sense. It just who I am as a person, I can't understand how anybody in their right mind could say, especially if you have guidelines already imposed by the government. And then her argument to go against the guidelines imposed by the government was that, well, it's not, the government guidelines have been in place for 20 plus years since before the advent of the computers. So we're not going to pay attention to what the guidelines say. Instead, we're going to pay attention to her reason. See, you can tell because I'm sitting here and I'm like struggling with what I'm trying to say because it doesn't make any sense. She basically said because now it's easier for someone to go and find these photos online and download them and upload them, and they could do it in bulk, that the crime isn't the same crime as it would be if they have to mail a picture and receive it through the U.S. Postal Service, which doesn't make any sense. Because it's still the same thing. It's still the same crime. And in fact, when you upload more photos, it should have a higher enhancement, which is what the sentencing guidelines called for, which is what she disagreed with. She said if one person sends a picture through the Postal Service and one person downloads 5,000 pictures, that is the same thing. And just because a person downloads 5,000 pictures, the crime is not as severe if someone received 50 pictures through the actual snail mail. Does that make any sense? In her eyes, that is what she was passing the judgment on. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. It really, really doesn't make any sense. Or the sentence doesn't make any sense. Because especially with the reason for the crime, and then Ketanji Brown Jackson said under oath that she didn't just look at the sentencing guidelines. She did say she had a problem with the sentencing guidelines. When she was at Harvard, she wrote a big paper about the sentencing guidelines and how she has a problem with the sentencing guidelines. But she said her big determining factor was these probation reports. These reports that were issued by probation and parole, and those were the reason why she went under the sentencing guidelines. 46 or 47% of the time, well, 100% of the time she went under the state guidelines. 47% of the time she even broke with the prosecution, sentencing the perverts to under what the prosecution was asking. It doesn't make, and we are literally considering nominating this, or we're days away from potentially voting this woman to be the next Supreme Court justice. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And then you have the argument that a guy that's selling drugs, because she made another argument, a guy that's selling drugs and has had a span of 10 years of not getting caught doing it. Right. But then is when he's finally caught, like, for example, 10 years ago, so say 2012, he would have been caught with drugs or, whatever crime, a felony. He was convicted of a felony, got out, got off all judicial restraint, got off probation and parole and all that stuff. And then for 10 years, he kept out of handcuffs, essentially. You don't know whether he was still committing crimes. You don't know. And then ultimately, 10 years later, he gets arrested. Now, he's not arrested for like peddling little, nickel and dime bags on the street. No, he's arrested and charged under kingpin status, which means that he was a kingpin running a drug ring, packaging drugs inside his home with his little children present, according to the complaint. Based on that kingpin status, based on the fact that he had prior criminal records and prior criminal convictions, he fell into the sentencing guideline for kingpin status, saying that he was a danger to society for selling drugs and all this stuff. Her response is that he wasn't caught for 10 years, essentially, because he wasn't caught for 10 years, even though obviously there was some buildup before he became a kingpin, that he didn't deserve the mandatory minimum that was imposed by the government. So she didn't charge him. She didn't sentence him to that, against the prosecution, against the probationary report, and against the statute, the sentencing guidelines imposed by the government. I don't know how you can, like, with those things, those are major issues. She's not running for Senate. She's not running for anything else other than she's trying to sit on the Supreme Court, the highest court in the United States, for a lifetime appointment. For a lifetime appointment. That is the craziest thing, really, to think about. She's on for a lifetime appointment. And I don't know, man. I really don't know. It's frustrating to me because I sat here, I watched, like today I really listened to it. I was listening to first you had all the three attorneys that were part of the American Bar Association that were just giving their praises for this woman and kind of didn't answer any real questions. And here's my other criticism of Jackson Brown, whatever her name is. My real criticism of her is every time she was posed with a question, everyone said, like, all the Democrats were saying, oh, she did a great job. She really answered all the questions. It was great. How you stood here and sat through everything was amazing. And you never lost your resiliency and blah, blah, blah. She didn't answer a question. Any question that was posed, she'd be like, thank you, Senator, for asking that. Now I'm not going to provide you with an answer. I'm just going to keep talking aimlessly for a minute until you cut me off and ask me to redirect the question. The Democrat lawmakers that were sitting on the Judicial Committee continued to interrupt it, when, for example, Ted Cruz was asking questions. He was constantly being interrupted. Marsha Blackburn was asking questions. And here's the thing. If you have these probationary, back to the sentencing things, if you have these probationary reports that she's saying were the reason why she sentenced these people, basically she said, well, the one information that you guys don't have, because the statutory requirements, because they're statutory and everyone knows it, you already have the documents from the prosecutor's office, so they know what the prosecution office was asking for sentencing. She said, well, the one thing you don't know is why I base my decision that way, and that's because of the probation reports. There's so much stuff with this confirmation hearing that's just disgusting to me. The fact that the White House, when these questions were raised about the child sex picture, whatever, when these questions were raised in a committee under oath, the White House then broke away. They're not part of it, but the White House then requested from the federal probation for these 14 cases, the actual probation sentencing requirements, and then provided that information, provided a single, Excel spreadsheet essentially that said the court case, the name of the course, the date the probation report was issued, what the probation report said, what the judge ended up saying, and then the release date of the prisoner, or a projected release date, and provided this spreadsheet not to all members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, only the Democrat members. And when that came out yesterday in a live hearing, I was like, this is over. This is over. At this point, it shows that the White House is deliberately keeping information from Republicans on this Judiciary Committee, which it seems like her whole argument was revolving around. Well, it's because of these probationary reports. The White House gets the probationary reports and only furnishes that information to Democrats that are part of this commission. And then their answer for it is, well, you could have requested it. That's what the Democrats, the chair, I forgot what his name was now, begins with an R, but that's what the chair was saying, is you could have requested these documents. They didn't request the documents. The documents were furnished to the Democrats by the White House. The staff of the White House, not everybody else. And that was the major question that everybody was saying is, how do you, because with these confirmation hearings, you already have a period of discovery, which is where you go through. Durbin. Yeah, it was began with a D. Chair Durbin, the Democrat. He was sitting there making the argument, well, yeah, even though we would have talked about this in discovery, but it wasn't asked. We were ambushed, is what they said, by, actually going over a Supreme Court nominee's actual judicial record. How is that an ambush? Isn't that what the whole conversation should have been? Shouldn't I mean, we know Cory Booker sat up there and just sang her praises for days and days, and more power to him. Like if that's the way he wants to roll, then I get it. I understand. I mean, that's a pattern. Cory Booker, not once in the 2 rounds of questioning of her, and even today, when he was questioning all the panel and then the ABA people, he didn't actually question. He didn't ask questions. He didn't say like, okay, let's talk about your record behind the bench. Let's talk about your record as an independent attorney. Let's talk about, this. He didn't do that. What he did is he sang praises and invoked, the racial card again. And more power to, I think it's incredible that a African-American black woman, whatever the proper saying is, I don't even know anymore, but I think it's incredible that we have a Supreme Court nominee that potentially may sit on, that's an African-American woman. The problem is that was the deciding factor on why she was brought in. And then that's what all the Democrats were saying. And I believe we've had other African-American nominees too, probably women nominees. They just were on the conservative side, so it didn't work. It's mind-boggling. And just so everyone knows, this isn't going to like throw the balance towards Democrats in the Supreme Court. It's not the end-all be-all. But this is an appointment for someone that is 40, 51 years old. A lifetime appointment. She could essentially sit on the Supreme Court for 40 years. She could. For 40 years. Think about the things, especially if she's light on sentencing and light on I mean, there's other stuff that's just weird. Okay, she was a hold on, my phone's ringing, so let me get rid of that. She was the U.S. Public Defender's Office representative for a Guantanamo Bay detainee, right? This is another thing that they didn't talk enough about. And it really made me question, why aren't they not talking about this? They did just for a second. Cotton did. Again, Cotton was the only one that actually had a lot of new information. She was a U.S. public defender representing one of the Guantanamo Bay detainees. She had written all sorts of stuff and all that stuff. It doesn't matter about that. None of that really matters right now for what I'm saying. Her Guantanamo Bay detainee ended up firing essentially and went to a private firm, a big mega firm that decided to take that case pro bono. A short time later, she quits the U.S. Public Defender's Office, joins the same firm, and joins his legal team again. And she literally went and said under oath that it was coincidence. And nobody really challenged that and said, well, you could call it coincidence, or you could say small world or whatever. No, there's no way that you were on. She's like, well, I didn't request to be on the legal team. Right after I was hired, that they said, hey, we have this person here and you worked on that case as a U.S. public defender. Now would you work on this case? And she's like, sure. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Doesn't make a lot of sense. And here's another thing. They tried to make a lot of nothing burgers. A lot of the Republicans tried to make these nothing burger attacks on her. Like, she made some comments about pro-life protesters. If you actually read what she wrote about pro-life, it was in a complaint, and she was saying, she was making a descriptor of the protesters that were outside when people are trying to go into those clinics, which I'm not even talking about how just fucking morally wrong all that is. What I'm saying is she was making a defense of the people walking in there by saying that when they walk in, that there's no buffer zone. Massachusetts has a buffer law, which means you got to be 4 feet away or whatever the actual law states. And people were encroaching on that buffer zone either through loudspeakers or in person or whatever the fact is. And she made a descriptor for them saying they're loud and offensive and blah, blah, blah. I don't care about that. And for them to waste, questioning on that ticks me off. Because, and I understand you're trying to make it seem like she's supporting, a woman's right to choose and all that shit, which we don't even know because she wouldn't give an answer under oath about that. But they were making it a big deal. I literally, when we watched all the riots and the protests and all that shit last year, I said the same thing of those protests. I said, listen to these loud idiots out there with their air horns, chanting, yelling at police and all. I said the same thing. It's a descriptor for idiots. You know what I mean? She was using that, and not to say that the protesters that are out there, the pro-life protesters, are idiots, but she was providing context into an argument. And they literally focused a 30-minute questioning session on that instead of some of these other things. Like, I would have beaten down the door. Like, here's the thing. You ask, can she define a woman? She says no. Under oath, I'm not a biologist. I can't define a woman. What? And so they're just like, oh, okay. And that's it. And the question's not done. Like, if you are there to find out the integrity of a person, right? And I've already said this publicly and people disagree with me. I think that the Supreme Court nomination process should take years. Why? Because you are putting in someone that has a massive amount of judicial responsibility, let alone they could single-handedly steer the direction of this country. And so the process to get in there shouldn't be sitting in front of a committee or a thorough FBI background check or none of that stuff. No, the process should be like any information that comes public. Durbin was saying today that the reason why they can't release the probation reports are because it would have sensitive information as it relates to the victims of those crimes. I'll be honest with you. I agree with that. You can't release that information publicly, but you know what you could do, which is what every single member of the Republican caucus asked, or the Republican caucus of the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's what they asked. They said, fine, lock the shit down, lock it down. Make it all confidential. We'll go into closed session. We can review it to see if it correlates with what she said. And if the thing is, if you really want to push a nominee through, and that is the main hookup, and that's the main hang up for the conservatives, why not do that? Why not restrict the access, shut the thing down, put all 22 of them in a room and say, okay, here are the files. All phones stay outside. You're not allowed to repeat this. You're not allowed to look at this at all. Durbin says, well, I can't, on my conscience, it's not happening on my watch because what if someone's information gets out? Mind you, the majority of the leaks that have come out recently are not, they're leaks from that committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee. When they were looking at the sex offending cases, the Washington Post released an article 5 days before this with the information that the Democrats had. And that's how they were forced to provide that same information to the Republicans. I don't know. I really don't. It's frustrating to me because that role and that responsibility is supposed to be the highest responsibility that you can have in office, right? And so why we push it? Didn't Joe Biden just nominated her at the end of last month? Here we are, not even 30 days later, and she's just passed the Senate Judiciary. And granted, they haven't formally voted on that. That doesn't happen till Monday at 3. And I don't think that's public. They have a couple of closed sessions in between that where they're going to bicker back and forth, and those won't be televised. But then Monday at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock, I forgot what time, that's where they're going to formally vote and have some big, whatever, and then Senate will vote, and this has to pass at a simple majority for her to go. So the only thing I could say is, even me just reflecting on, I can't get past the light sentencing or breaking from probation and parole sentencing requirements, breaking 100% of the time with people that are convicted of child pictures. 100% of the time, she sentenced under what the statutory requirement was or statutory guideline was. I cannot get past that. Everything else, fine. She's an incredibly bright woman. She has a great family. I can't, literally, if she wasn't a federal circuit judge and she didn't deal with this stuff, for example, if this all wasn't here, I would be like, well, she seems like a great candidate to be on there. Because yes, all the same shit, the CRT shit came up, blah, 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 all that. I don't care about that. I really don't, because it doesn't affect me and it doesn't affect my kids. You know what I mean? A lot of people make that argument and say, how can you say that? But because I'll pull my kids out of school. If they're being taught something I don't want them to learn in school, I pull them out. I have that right as a parent and that responsibility. But I'm not going to sit here and just chastise everybody else. I don't know. I don't know, man. It's really weird that there's people choose to nitpick on small things. That to me is a deal breaker. I'll be honest. The fact that she wouldn't give an accurate answer and relied on the probation reports and then tried to say that someone that downloads 5,000 pictures isn't as serious as someone that mails or receives 25 pictures. It's not the same thing because a picture is worse when it's physically mailed versus downloading. That doesn't make any sense. That to me, I can't understand. If you catch someone, and I don't even want to talk about it. It's revolting to me. But if you catch someone with one photo or 5 million photos, guess what? They are the same to me. And there's only one place for them, and that's behind bars, TikTok. That's it. Nowhere else. That's it. Everyone that's watched my show, you already know where that one place is. But I don't know, man. Someone said, I hate to break it to you, but once they get their CRT, then yeah, but the CRT shit is not, my wife is a fucking teacher, guys, okay? So regardless of what anyone else says, and I live in liberal Virginia, okay? My wife is a teacher, a public school teacher here. We've had conversation after conversation. Is there shit that I disagree with in terms of school? Absolutely. Is there shit that I disagree with that she does in allowing kids, young children, to make up their own pronouns and have rules to not tell teachers? Absolutely. Absolutely. But here's the thing. I also, if my son ever came home and said one of the things that he has a whole list of shit where if it's said in school, he's to immediately, some things he's to pull out his phone in the middle of class. And then when they yell at him, he say, I'm calling my dad. You guys messed up. But I have that responsibility. The CRT shit, dude, they've been doing this forever. They've been doing it forever. Teach your kids right. Don't rely on the school to teach your kids. Half the time, they're not teaching them shit anymore anyway. You teach your kids. And I'm not saying you got to pull them out of public school and all that, although that is a good choice if you could deal with it. But you teach your kids. You're responsible for your kids and how your kids turn out in the long run. It's not anybody else. It's not your schools. It's not your parents. You are the one that's directly responsible for how well your kid succeeds at life. And I've said that for a long time. It's not up to anyone else. And that's why I don't understand why when a 14-year-old is out at 2 o'clock in the morning and shoots at a police officer and then is shot and killed by that police officer, I don't understand why the parent is in charge. I've never understood that. I think the parents of the 13 and 14-year-old that carjacked the Uber driver or the Uber delivery driver in D.C. and flipped it and killed him, those parents should be charged. I've always said that, and I've said it 100% of the time. If my kid goes to school, loses his shit, gets in a fight, and does something stupid, I am responsible for that. I am the dad that taught him his actions and what I am the one that's supposed to instill right and wrong in that child. When he goes to school, he's supposed to learn about math and English and gym and science. That's what he's supposed to learn about, not all this other shit. And they don't even do stuff like dodgeball. Dodgeball is gone. They don't even do dodgeball anymore in school. Luckily we're switching districts. We're actually paying for our kids to leave the school district they're in and pay to have them go to my wife's school district because there's such huge differences. And we're not residents of that county, but we have that luxury because she works there. So we are paying to have them in there. My son is taking a high school. He's in 7th grade next year, and he's taking a high school level Spanish class. He's taking an intro to business class where they build up a business in his course. The shit, some of that's really cool, but at the same time, I freak out when he's going to take a civics class. My wife in Florida, civics was a requirement. She was a civics teacher. That scared the shit out of me because my wife is a liberal. And I'm like, what are you teaching them? She's like, I'm teaching them honestly. We've furnished both sides, and I asked her to describe certain things, and she does, but she's different than everybody else. She actually, is rational. What about these other teachers? What if my son has a civics teacher? For example, when I was in college, I took a political science course, right? And my instructor, I was a conservative. Well, I am a conservative. I'm not a Republican anymore. But I was a Republican, and back then I was active in politics and appointed. I was members of a bunch of different boards and commissions on the city I lived in, and I was trying to figure out the best way to say what I wanted in this political science class. It was an online college course, so there was a lot of writing, a lot of reports, and every single time I would write something, obviously I had a political bias because of my politics and where I align. Every single time I wrote something, the instructor would, say, you got to take politics out of it, blah, blah, blah. This is not right, according to, and then he cited the Huffington Post, and that's what caught me. Granted, this is before the Huffington Post was tabloid, but they were always extremely left-wing. And so I started looking into this guy, and then I found out he's a total lefty. And I actually had to go to the school and say, listen, guys, like, not only am I paying to take this course, like, we also recommend that our employees, that's how we had the deal with them. We paid the college for our employees with that company that I worked for. We paid to have our employees go there and get degrees and finish their degrees and get master's degrees. It was part of our benefits package. So I literally had to call the school and be like, listen, I need you to review this article. Tell me how this report that I wrote is in the least bit political, and then look in the messages. I got an A in that course because what they realized is that this guy was putting his politics before everything else. And so my reports or my assignments for this class were on point. They were on point. They met the requirements of the course, but this guy had a political bias. And so he was downgrading based on his political bias. He was fired by that college, mind you. But you don't always get people. And he taught there for years. So how many people did he dissuade from actually being honest? You know what I mean? How many people did he say, well, your opinion on that isn't correct and we're going to fail you? How many people did that happen to? How many people does that happen to? And then imagine putting that control in kids' heads. Like, imagine making kids, a seventh grader that's taking a civics course and he has a teacher that aligns with the left and that isn't doing what teachers are supposed to do, is put their personal politics aside and actually teach the kids. What do you do when, I know what we do. We just talk. We talk to our children. So if my son comes home and he's like, hey, Dad, in civics class today, they were saying that the Trump administration, I'm going to be like, okay, stop right there. I'll be in your class tomorrow. I'll even wear a tie. You know what I mean? It's I don't know, man. I don't know. I see people in the chat are talking about Biden. He just finished his speech in Europe. Frankly, what is more damaging? And here's what I'm trying to figure out. Not more damaging to other countries. Now, I'm pivoting hard. For everyone that's just watching right now, this is a hard pivot right now. This is a hard pivot. What good... Or no, actually, let's take it back. What? Let me find. When every time Joe Biden opens his mouth, he hurts us as a country. So for a long time, every single speech he had, we showed on our network, on Citizen Stringer TV. Every single speech, White House press conference, every single time. But what I've come to realize in the past couple of weeks is that every time we highlight his speech, we show his speech, we show the White House press conference or press circus, whatever you want to call it. When we show that, do you know what happens? Morale in this country, specifically gauged through me, goes down. It goes down. When Joe Biden gets up there and speaks on behalf of all Americans, and make no mistake, that is what he's doing. You may not like the fella, just like everybody else, but he, on the world stage, he is speaking for you. It's embarrassing and it's frustrating to me. You know what I mean? It's frustrating to me. I see people talking because I do see the chat, the social media chat. I'm not paying attention to it. It's daytime, so we only have 500, 600 people watching right now across all of it. So I'm not really paying attention to it as much as I want. I don't care what he says. I saw someone saying, someone else just said, he's slurring and getting aggravated at reporters. Of course he is. It's Joe Biden. Have you met the guy? Have you met him? He always gets angry with the reporters and slurs his speech. Today is going to be no different. But now he's having a stern speech to President Putin. And that's I don't know. Like the whole Ukraine stuff too. I'm not even going there. I'm not. What benefits us with Biden speaking? Nothing. Actually, we regress. Because here's the thing. He could say something so dangerous. He does it. He's said it before. He said things that are dangerous. He said things that just rile up the far right ones. He says things that freak out the left. He said, because he doesn't, it's not like when Donald Trump would speak and he would rile up everybody, people would get pissed at him, people would not. When Joe Biden speaks, it's actually damaging to our country virtually every time. We are viewed in a different light by the other countries as weak. I mean, hell, they've literally chastised us for our involvement with Ukraine as it stands now. And Zelensky says that we're not doing enough and basically calls out Biden and says, if you want to be the leader of the free world, you must lead the free world. Like all this bullshit. And again, I want to make it perfectly clear to everyone, especially you on TikTok. Do you know what's the most concerning thing to me? And I've already said this, most of my regular viewers know this. We sent $800 million in military supplies to Ukraine, and we have homeless people sleeping out on the streets here in the United States, veterans sleeping on the streets. We have veterans' children starving right now in the United States. We have so many things that we could have better used that money for instead of securing someone else's border. Today, I started doing a show earlier today. I recorded about a half an hour of it, and I wasn't feeling it, so I just stopped. I went through our disorder on the border. Every week, Lauren, one of our writers on citizenstringer.com, writes a disorder on the border report. This week is no different than any other week. Hundreds, if not thousands of illegal migrants crossing the southern border. Millions of dollars worth of drugs crossing. Criminals, sex offenders, murderers caught trying to cross into the United States. Every single day. We can't secure that border, but yet we're sending supplies and armaments to other countries to secure their borders. My wife, she's a liberal, humanitarian is what she keeps trying to say in response to all this stuff. She keeps saying it's a humanitarian crisis there. We have a human responsibility to protect Ukraine. And I said, what about what's going on in their southern border? And she said, it's different. I said, how is it different? And she said, because people are being killed on the streets. And I'm like, they're being killed on the streets here. People are literally dropping dead because of fentanyl overdoses. Don't you remember the 6 different West Point people that were all nearly killed in Miami when they overdosed on some drug that was laced with fentanyl? What about all the random people that the no-namers that die every single day because of drug overdoses across the United States? A huge portion of those drugs are imported they cross the southern border. A huge portion of them. And why don't we care? They talk about this, like, for example, COVID, when all the spending we did on COVID, it was like $3 trillion, which was like 150 times or 1,050 times more than what we spent on cancer research when cancer kills more people. Like, the way we do things in this country is so backwards. And I know a lot of that kind of stuff is like a lot of people, like a lot of times when I go onto the rant, like, because the only people that I think we should actually protect that are coming in to the United States are the children. If we have an unaccompanied child, they need to come into the United States because you can't just turn them around. Grown-ups, send them back. Flood their countries with jobs. And I know it's so fucking weird to say, and I know a lot of people disagree with it, because everyone's like, America first this, America first that. We have a problem with migration into this country. Do you know why we have a problem with migration into this country, illegal immigration into this country? It's because the living conditions in those countries are so bad. We push to bring all these jobs back to the United States where they pay shit wages. People complain about them. People leave. All the while, we're bringing in 200,000, a fifth of a million people every month through our southern borders. That's not including all the legal immigration that's taking place that are trying to come in and take those jobs. Why aren't we trying to, and I know because of corrupt governments and all that, I know we are so dead set on overthrowing governments, like instilling the Zelenskys and this current regime in 2014 in Ukraine. Why are we doing that in countries that we control, or countries that are right here that we actually have a fucking problem with? I guess that's the part that I just don't understand. That's the part I just don't understand any of this stuff. You know what I mean? Because I know you can't give money to these countries because they're all corrupt. The Mexican officials, Guatemalan officials, everybody. They're all officials. Hold on. All right. Sorry. I do have an actual storefront here, which is what that was the bell. I don't even know if you guys heard it, but the postman was here delivering a package. And I'm like, I hope you're ready. You're gonna get a lot more packages. Man. Someone said on TikTok, someone said, go Steve, telling the truth, haters are gonna hate. Yeah, I mean, and TikTok is not a place that you watch if you're not if you don't have thick skin. Because there's one of the reasons I want to go to TikTok is part of the reason why I do the show in the first place, which is to raise awareness to some of the shit that is going on in this country, right? It's not to get you to agree with me. It's not to get you, for me to like beat it into your head that you have to like side with me or something. That's not what it is. I want you to understand an opposing view. I want you to understand. Fuck, you can turn and disagree with it all you want. But as long as you understand what I'm saying, then that is a step in the right direction. You know? That is a step in the right direction. Someone said, when is the last day to order a mega box? Next Wednesday. Well, I mean, you can always order them, but next Wednesday, they'll default to next week. Or they'll default to next month. But yeah, that's what I'm waiting for. Now I got to search because this was a return. So someone ordered a shirt or something and it said insufficient address. So now I got to track that down. We still have a bunch of coffee too. All the coffee orders in the past 3 days. For anyone that wasn't paying attention, our server and everything went down. Power went down. We actually had a fire on a power pole out front. Well, it's actually on the intersection, but attached to this office building. And we lost power and internet. Pretty much, I think the fire started around 4:00 this morning, and they didn't restore it until 10:30. So I was running like a backup live stream and all that stuff. But now we're up, knock on wood, and it's good. So someone said, "How do we get our country back?" Fuck if I know. I don't know. I mean, I used to say run for office, you know, like on local level. I really don't know. I mean, our country's still here. And if you look at the history of our country, there's always been divisiveness. There's always been, you know, one version of right and wrong that conflicts with someone else's version of right and wrong. That's always what it's going to be. It's never going to go away that way. But I worry that this divide, you know what I mean? And I always say it, like, people on the left have a vision for America. Now, if you take away all the characteristics of that vision and you just have that vision, that may not make sense, but it's like, okay, this is sitting right here, right? Now there's a million ways. You can come straight at it, or you can go around this, you know, thing of hot sauce. You can go around there, or you can come around this side, but this is still your ending destination. Does that make sense? There's a lot of ways to get there, and a lot of them may be stupid ways. We have to remember that this is our ending, you know, our end goal is to leave this country a better place for us, to leave this country a better place for our kids and their kids and generations to come. We have to figure out how we can all just kind of allow that to happen. You know, if I'll be honest, I'm tired. I no longer, I am not a Republican anymore because of the representatives that are in office. Some of them are too far right for me, and other ones aren't. They don't care. To me, I used to say that I would vote for a Democrat if they actually believed in this country. And I realize how hurtful that is because I'm married to a Democrat who believes in this country. But her definition of this country and our country is completely different. I almost said flawed. Different than what some other people's are. You know what I mean? Like I see the whole woke culture and all this stuff I see that. And I worry how damaging that is to us as a country. Like socialism is bad. Communism is bad. Those things we know, or at least I know. That's my belief. Other people believe the difference, or they believe differently. And that's fine. But I know, like, for example, the way I want to raise my kids and the way my wife want to raise our kids, they're different ways. But we have one end goal. That's to raise great kids that love and respect themselves, love and respect their families, love and respect their country. We just have different ways of doing it. I'm a stern parent. My wife is super mellow, hippie-ish almost. You know what I mean? That's just how it is. And I think when we figure out as a country that we can actually listen to each other and we can try to understand each other, that is the only way we're going to fix it. That and truly, and it starts from the top down, and I'll be honest, and I don't think it's achievable unless we replace everybody from the top down. Whether we have to replace every elected official from the top down, even the ones that are considered good or your reps. No, they all have to go because here's the thing, and term limits are a must if you want to actually see this country succeed. They're a must. You know why? Because, and I've said this before, tell me how, like for all of you guys, and I look at TikTok right now, for all of you guys that watch this right now, how many of you guys think Patrick Leahy, like a 95, I don't know how old he is, 80 something years old, been in office longer than I've been alive, or Bernie Sanders, or Nancy Pelosi, or Durbin has been he's been in longer than I've been alive as well. Think about those people and ask yourself truthfully. You can agree with their politics, but you have to ask yourself this truthfully. How do they know what it's like to be you? How does someone that has lived in politics, that doesn't have the same roles and responsibility, they have a $192,000 a year salary, and I believe they gave themselves a raise again. They don't know what it's like to go shopping for themselves. They don't know what it's like to change a tire or worry about being able to feed your kids or worry about buying, a $190 inhaler for your asthmatic child. They don't know those struggles. They don't. When they came into office, people didn't even have cell phones. Hell, I wasn't even born when some of these people came in, and yet they try to relate and say that the laws and the things that they're putting into play are for the best interests of the American public that they can't even relate to. They don't understand. I don't understand that either. It's just, I have a list of things I just don't understand. But those are things that I want you guys to ask. Those are things that I want the liberal viewers, because we have them that sit here and don't say anything and watch. Tell me how someone that doesn't know what it's like to actually be an everyday working American. I made the mistake of saying they're not American. That's not what I mean. Is that they're not working every day. They're not experiencing life every day. Sorry, the phone was ringing. They're not. They're simply just not. I don't know, man. I think that's the only way we can actually deal with it is replace everybody that's in office right now. And all candidates should have to sign something saying they agree to term limits. I heard Cory Booker today saying, well, I've been trying to get in here for 8 years. 8 years. And I'm like, if term limits, we wouldn't have to listen to Cory Booker. Horrible, horrible, horrible conversation. Or his, what he has to say. And I'll be honest, I used to like Cory Booker. When I lived in Jersey before he became senator and all that stuff, he charged into a fire. And I know there's a lot of stuff about that, but he saved a family from a burning fire in Newark, New Jersey. And a lot of people said it's staged and he didn't really do shit, whatever. But I remember hearing the news reports on that, and I'm like, see, that's an American. And then he ran for Senate, and I'm like, holy crap, he's nuts. And not nuts because he ran for Senate. His policies are completely batshit crazy. And every time he opens his mouth, you're like, oh my God, I'm stupider. But I don't know, man. We got to remember that we are Americans. Before you're a Republican, before you're a Democrat, you're an American. And I guess we have to come to the point where we decide whether or not that matters more than arguing with each other and eventually killing each other. That's just my thought. Thank you all you guys for watching. This video is going to replay at 9 o'clock tonight on Citizen Stringer TV. Pete and Tilly will be live at 6 o'clock, 6 to 9 tonight. Sorry, Pete, I didn't get your switch over because, well, we had a fire and we couldn't get everything going. After 9 o'clock tonight, I will have the Ukraine on Fire and Revealing Ukraine documentaries. They're going to play again to kind of break the monotony. And then we will go from there. But I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in and hanging out with me. Everyone on TikTok, fun stuff, right? Wasn't that bad? We maintained a really low viewer count the whole time, but it's worth it. What do we got? 15,000 likes? Could be better. They weren't tapping quick enough. But eventually, maybe what I would love to be able to do is have it so TikTok could see this screen. But apparently, there is no way to do that anymore because I can't get an RTMP input to TikTok. They don't allow you to do it anymore. So kind of screwed there. But appreciate all you guys, and I'm going to end all these feeds. But we will see you later.